Hello, welcome to the third video of our data management series. Today I want to talk about data privacy. I want in fact to set the stage for a discussion on data privacy management. I believe it's important to understand the evolution of privacy through history to better appreciate today's challenges and the impact of regulation even for very important matters such as the fight against the COVID pandemic. In the next video, I will be talking about how businesses should comply to privacy, protect personal data, and use it for strategic differentiation. Here is what I want to cover today. I will be presenting this slide as we move forward. Let me start with a very brief historical perspective on privacy and its close relationship with two forces, the creation of wealth and the creation of technology. Well, privacy is a recent modern concept associated to Western cultures. For some time it was the privilege of the wealthy, or at least for those that could afford it. It was only debated seriously as a right for the first time in 1890 in a famous article by Warren and Brandeis called The Right to Privacy, where they argued for the right to be let alone, using that phrase as a definition of privacy. It came about as a reaction to the creation of technology to exploit the private affairs of others. At that time, it was the instantaneous publication of photographs and the ability to publish them widely in what we now call the yellow press without one's consent. During the 20th century, capitalism continued to be on the privacy side, at least in the US and European countries. In fact, the rise of a middle class that could live in their own home laid the foundations for legal thinkers and activists to talk about the the right of masses to enjoying the right to privacy. In 1948, the right to privacy made it to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And in 1965, the US Supreme Court recognized privacy as a constitutional right. Up to here, the discussion was on the relational part of privacy, meaning who may enter your home or not enter, or the way you behave in private. However, in 1967, the informational dimension of privacy entered the scene. This came about as the culmination of a project started 5 years earlier in 1962, a project entitled The Impact of Science and Technology on Privacy. In his book, Privacy and Freedom, law professor Alan Weston summarized the debate and defined privacy in terms of self-determination, namely the claim of individuals, groups, or institutions to determine for themselves how, when, and to what extent information about themselves is communicated to others. This concept is now the basis of several country laws since the 70s and privacy laws, GDPR and CCPA. So if we were to plot how levels of privacy evolved through time and wealth accumulation during the 20th century, we could have had the following 3D surface. Privacy might have been high for a wealthy person because he or she could afford it for someone in 1890, but low for non-wealthy people. But as capitalism progressed through the 20th century and rights to privacy were made into laws, much more people could have enjoyed higher levels of privacy. However, since the beginning of the 21st century, capitalism has begun to change sides. Business models predicting consumer behavior have become incredible forces of wealth creation, and those forces no longer work for the expansion of privacy, but work to undermine it. Again, technology is stoking this trend because it's made it very easy and very cheap to collect personal data, to store it, and to process it in ever smarter ways. In her book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, Shoshana Zuboff, a sociologist from Harvard Business School, paints a vast picture of this new form of capitalism that has found a way to monetize behavioral predictions derived from the surveillance of billions of users like you and me that use services that capture our data and our attention, and we all cheerfully use them because they're free. So this idea was first put to work by Google by using search keywords entered by people browsing the internet. They use them to predict what's called a click-through rate of a page. So let's suppose that I am into wine and I browse the internet looking for nice Pinot Noir. So Google will know that if a wine ad is presented to me, I have a high probability of clicking it. So with time, the algorithm got better. They got more users, so the results improved. And so the prediction of click-through rates of page ads skyrocketed between 2001 and 2004, giving birth to what's now called the market of targeted advertising. Now, there are two things with this trick that I would like to highlight. First, it can be used in many other domains. And second, it works against privacy. Let me develop the first aspect. Predicting behavior by observing what consumers do through the data trail they leave behind on their everyday activity can be replicated from advertising into retail, for example, where Amazon is the main convert. It can be replicated into entertainment as well. We have witnessed how Netflix and Spotify have picked up the pace. In media, Facebook has now finally admitted they are a media company. In cable, in telecom, in electronics, and so on and so forth. This is why now it permeates capitalism. On to our second point, this surveillance is an attack on privacy because some of these companies behave as the technology disruptors that they are, meaning that they would rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Google not only took our search keywords, but wanted to digitize any book printed, and took pictures of every street and house on the planet without asking for any consent to anybody. As for Facebook, Zuckerberg in 2010 famously declared that privacy was no longer the expectations of users and unilaterally declared the status of 350 million of Facebook users to become public. This is why I believe our 3D picture now looks more like this. Levels of privacy have diminished across the board in the 21st century. The argument for this surveillance is that these services and products are better because they can be personalized. That is, they appear to match the customer's needs and expectations. So now you have personalized digital retail, personalized digital experiences in finance, and so on. And these seem to work because, as an Accenture poll recently showed, 91% of the consumers prefer to shop with brands that provide offers and recommendations that are relevant to them. However, as we will see in a minute, this has to be done with some care because it doesn't work always, and there are some tensions with privacy. On to our next topic. These business models are under some challenge because of a surge of data breaches and because of the consumer reaction of all of these phenomena. As we can see here in this chart from risk-based security, the number of data breaches keeps growing, with about 7,100 breaches reported in 2019. A spectacular recent increase has happened in the number of individual hacked records, 15 billion in 2019. According to Gemalto, an analyst, identity theft is the most important type of breach incident, followed by financial access. Malicious attackers, most of them outside, some of them inside, are the biggest cause of breaches, with outside malicious attackers having grown the most. They use a myriad of methods that we don't have the time to get into in this video. There is also human error and system glitches, but these are smaller causes. And of course, there's politics behind this, ideological or state-sponsored hacking, as we all know. Healthcare services are the most affected industry, with finance, insurance, and technology rounding out the top three. What all this data is telling us is that this pervasive malicious attacker trend is most probably being caused by the gold mine represented by the personal data stored by all these businesses betting on personalization and on behavior prediction. Now, companies are seeing the cost of data breaches increase. According to this IBM-sponsored study, the average total cost of a breach in the US is $8.19 million in 2019. It's a 130% increase in 14 years. The costs are divided in these four categories, with the cost of lost business being the highest at 36%. Here we can see numbers for abnormal customer turnover, which are those customers leaving a business after a breach. In the graph, they are organized in bins First being is less than 1%, last one is greater than 4%. And we can see very clearly that the more customers lost, the more the cost. So consumers lost is the biggest predictor of the total cost of a breach. It's also increasing. Here, purple bars are in 2018, blue bars in 2019. There was a 15% increase from 18 to 19 as the average turnover grew from 3.4% to 3.9%. So now let's look at the reaction from consumers. Consumers maintain high expectations for businesses to secure their data. If this expectation is not met, they resent it very strongly, which is why these very publicized recent breaches have eroded the trust that consumers had placed in businesses. Some numbers: 36% of consumers are less comfortable sharing data today than a year ago versus 17% that said the contrary. 85% say they wish there were more companies that they could trust with their data, and 76% call sharing personal information a necessary evil. As for the recent reaction of consumers with respect to the tension between personalization and privacy, well, it is not as clear-cut as some businesses believe it is. Consumers appreciate personalization only if done right. According to McKinsey, receiving a message based on location or within seconds of having made a purchase is considered to be intrusive. Acceptance also depends on cultural background and on the industry. So for instance, in the US, personalized medicine is quite well accepted according to analyst KRC research, whereas insurance in the UK, not as much, according to the research company British Thinks, who found that more than half of the UK consumers are uncomfortable with organizations that share their data about them for personalized insurance quotes, even if they had formally given consent for their data to be shared. Finally, there are signals that consumers are getting overloaded by ads. On some markets, consumers are even willing to pay in exchange for an ad-free service, which is the case of companies such as Spotify, where they are seeing more growth on their paying subscribers than on their non-paying business supported by ads. Here you can see that since 2016, compound average growth is 44% for premium subscribers versus 23.9% for free subscribers. I also wanted to share with you some results of an interesting scientific study done with adolescents around the tension between personalization and privacy, where it is shown that they have become more skeptical to retargeted ads. Those adolescents with a measured high privacy concern, labeled PC in the graphic, consider ads as a privacy invasion and clearly decreases purchase intentions, especially when they are being debriefed about an ad as being retargeted. So in managing data privacy, we have two big forces at play. A negative force characterized by consumer sensitivity against privacy intrusion and by the cost of a data breach, which is getting costlier by the day, and a positive force characterized by consumers that believe that personalization is a good thing and that consider that the value they get in return for their privacy exposure is worth it. The net result is that businesses are coming to terms with having to manage consumer personal data with risk management and risk mitigation strategies. And the good news is that privacy risks are getting well understood and businesses are applying best practices and discovering new technology to minimize these risks. We'll take a look at these best practices and technology in the next video. Let's move on to the impact of privacy regulation. So scrutiny and regulation by governments is increasing, mostly due to consumer pressure. Laws such as GDPR and CCPA protect consumers in two ways. One, by providing them with these self-determination rights, and two, by enticing businesses to protect their data because otherwise they get penalized in the case of a data breach. By the way, compliance to self-determination privacy rights is considered to be a positive differentiator for 84% of the people interviewed in a recent IBM survey. In addition, we believe that consumers do reward brands that protect their data and respect their privacy. Apple, for instance, has managed to project that image and consumers have rewarded them. Therefore, businesses should consider that privacy laws present them with an opportunity to differentiate services based on trust. I now want to talk about the privacy regulation trends in the US because the situation is unclear and is quickly evolving. As you know, in the US there is no comprehensive privacy law, but some state laws and traditional sectoral laws at the federal level, such as HIPAA in healthcare and GLPA in finance. However, there is a global appetite for a federal law. As you can see here in this map, there are a lot of bills at different stages of the process, but a law is sorely needed because these bills are inconsistent. Businesses don't want to have to deal with so many state variations, not to mention the international companies which already have to comply with the GDPR. Legislators understand that, and today there are already two proposals in the table, one from Republicans and another from Democrats, so there are reasons to be optimistic. To conclude, let me say a word about the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on legislation. I recently heard Privacy Counsel Pollyanna Anderson from the Future of Privacy Council talk about this very topic in a virtual conference recently. For her, the pandemic underscores the need for a global legislation. The EU's response was much faster and much clearer with GDPR as a guide. However, without a comprehensive law in the US, there is much more uncertainty about how US companies should share their data with health authorities and with policymakers. What are the safeguards to put in place? What are the acceptable data retention limitations? And so on and so forth. There is also less trust about the adoption of technologies such as contact tracing apps, and there is a concern about the expansion of surveillance. This is all I had for today. Thank you very much for your attention.